Welcome to Demming Chronicles, where we deconstruct the issues of today in terms of governance and the Constitution, business and development. We also look at the impact of the civic sector on our country's development. Our objective is to change the narrative about how our country progresses. We intend to have meaningful conversations with thought leaders and change makers. We reach out to today's idea generators and persons who wish to reimagine a different future for Trinidad and Tobago. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back, and today's guest is Farai Masaisai. Welcome, Farai.
Hi, Denise. Thank you for having me. Good afternoon to you and to your listeners and followers on social media.
Thank you for joining us. We've been tackling this issue of what is public space versus what is private space, and I wondered if you can give us some clarification.
You're asking me for clarification. I'm a bit confused, just as any other citizen in Trinidad, to tell you the truth. The public health ordinance, for reasons only known to the lawmakers, has not defined what is a public space. So unless somebody challenges that, it's open for interpretation as to what exactly is a public space and what exactly is a private space. The UK version of the Act does define what is a public space as opposed to a private space, and certainly your private vehicle falls into private space. I heard the Attorney General say that we have the unique phenomena of having PH drivers, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't at least make an attempt to define specifically within the Act what is a public space and what is a private space, because if you breach the COVID-19 regulations, you run the real risk of incarceration and your civil liberties being taken from you. So I suppose.
And Farai, you tell me, what is your profession?
I am an attorney at law. I'm a senior partner at Hove Associates, attorneys at law.
Farai, that question was a little cheeky on my part, because what I'm suggesting is that if you're an attorney at law and you have some lack of clarity, then what would you advise the citizenry, a member of the public?
Okay, so for example, I live in a gated community. So this morning I got up at about 5 a.m. to take a jog around the community. The community is probably, one lap of the community is about 1.5 kilometers. I normally make about 3 to 4 laps of the community. The Act speaks to private and public road. The community has a homeowners association, and we maintain the roads, not the regional corporation or anybody like that. So if I am jogging through my gated community, do I have to wear a mask? Because for me, I would say it's a private road. We maintain the roads. If there's a pothole, the homeowners, we talk to the developers and we get the thing done. The government has nothing to do with the roads. But under the public health ordinance, you could run a real risk that the police come into your gated community, see you jogging without a mask, and arrest you. And then it's up to you to challenge it in court, either by way of judicial review or constitutional motion. But it is a confusing thing, and law is not supposed to be confusing. Law is supposed to be, especially laws that carry arrestable offenses. We saw the situation in Alicia's house, where the gentleman said they went there for charitable works. That's their position on it, and the police arrested everyone. And then we saw the situation in Bayside Towers, where where the residents or the owners of the development call the police in for a poolside party, and the police basically stopped at the door and said, this is private, you know. So how do we define private? We leave it is too subjective, and law ought not to be subjective, because once it is subjective, then you run the risk of a apparent bias by any officer. So if I have offended an officer, an individual officer in any way, he may use that law, which is not clear, against me. You know, in the act it says there are exemptions that watch. If you are eating, you can take off your mask. Now, I normally have someone to drive me, whether it's my wife or my personal driver. They would drive me to work, and I would be in the back seat, and I probably might eat. That's just me. I eat on the go. I just don't have the time to sit down in the office or sit at the kitchen table and eat. You know, Monday to Friday. Sunday I would, but Monday to Friday, even sometimes on Saturday, I'm on the go. And what is this if a police officer pulls over my driver and says the occupant in the back seat does not have on a mask, but I have my sandwich on my lap? You know, so what, you're going to charge me? Well, I certainly wouldn't pay the fine. I'll challenge it. But not everybody has court clothes.
Exactly.
You know, not everybody has court clothes. And it shouldn't be that a law is passed that only those who are well off can challenge the law.
Farai, you are bringing up a significant issue of inequity, and give us a little 30-second wrap on really what should a citizen do under these circumstances in a lack of clarity.
No, what can you do? What can a citizen do? The thing is, you have to obey the law. The law is there. It is in place. The Calypsonians always sing about the law being a beep. You know, so it is a situation where it is that. But you as a citizen, you have to comply. The nature of our legal system is that you comply, then you complain. You know, so even if someone is wrongfully arrested under the act, you know, their only recourse is through the court. But by then, the damage has already been done psychologically, emotionally, the trauma, the embarrassment, you know, the stigma attached. You know, if you are charged and you are found guilty, even while you are challenging it through the constitutional court, that is a criminal record. And then I don't even know when last the Mercy Committee met to deal with presidential pardons. We have a long list of clients. Years they're waiting for just an acknowledgement with regards to application for presidential pardons, and some may be as simple as not paying a ticket, you know, or they pay the ticket late.
So on that note, Farai, what I hear is that the law is unclear, but citizens need to just obey. Wear their masks as much as possible, and try your best not to get in the way of our lawyers. Thank you very much, Farai, for bringing your thought to us with regard to what is the difference between public and private spaces. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back. Welcome to Demming Chronicles. And our guest today is Hamel Smith. Timothy Hamel Smith. Sorry that I called you Tim. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Denise. And it's good to be with the Chronicles. Happy to be here.
Yes. And I thought of having a conversation with you about the Constitution, because oftentimes in Parliament, the government suggests that they can't get a majority, a 2/3 majority, to change particular laws. Could you make a comment on that? To what extent is that 3/5 majority hamstringing the government from bringing progressive changes?
Well, certainly there are two different types of constitutional majorities required. in order to pass certain legislation. In particular, if you're going to interfere with the rights and freedoms of citizens, which are embedded in the Constitution, then you will require a fifth majority to do so. And, you know, might say because your rights and freedoms are being impacted, that it is good that in fact there should be some mechanism which makes sure that Parliament looks at these very carefully and that you are able to persuade the other side that the issue is important enough to warrant that in fact our rights and freedoms are impacted in the way that the government would like to do so.
Tim, are there any specific examples of changes that could be made that may not require that 3/5 majority, that may simply require a simple majority?
Yeah, there are huge numbers of things in terms of the Constitution. If you wanted to change the Constitution, that in fact can be done with a simple majority. So certainly things that I would like to see. We have in the Constitution, yes, our rights as individuals and the freedoms to which we're entitled to. What our Constitution doesn't do is tell us what are the duties and responsibilities of a citizen. So that then there becomes an imbalance because everybody thinks it's all about me. It's individualism versus society. So I would like to see those rights and responsibilities equally embedded in the Constitution. But there are other things that I would like to see citizens' assemblies, more democracy, if you like, because then it would permit people of different strands of view to be heard and to be taken into account about what we need in order for Trinidad and Tobago to transform and progress. That's a very important component of democracy. There are you can have fixed term, a fixed date election, and that only requires a simple majority. You can have term limits, so you can limit the term of a prime minister, leader of opposition, to 2 terms if you wanted, and those things are, I think, important and perhaps should be advanced to the benefit of everyone.
Tim, you just mentioned 2 things there that caught my interest tremendously. One is the issue of fixed terms for a prime minister, and you're saying that that only requires a simple majority. But why would a party in power bring that kind of change to the Parliament?
Well, if they thought it was, you know, I think what really happens, I think the literature which demonstrates that after you've been in power for more than 2 terms, you tend to allow power to go to your head. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, this isn't peculiar to any one politician. It is an act of nature. And to save things from themselves, and if politicians recognize that they require this, and look at, I mean, W has espoused this is his last term. So 2 terms impacted him negatively. It would, and it was succession in the political parties themselves, and it means that you are grooming more people. I wouldn't just abandon their organization when I come to retire. 3-4 years before I retire, I start grooming people to take my place. And therefore, it has a roll-on impact that I think is good for political parties. I think it's good for the country. And it's good for the actual individual who is the prime minister, who might, you know, I look at Tony, he had 2 great terms, and then he started a war with Iraq. And he fell down on that. And that is because he allowed, you know, power to really make him believe that he was the only person, as it were, that could rule. And he didn't have confidence in anybody else doing it. So you need to save politicians from themselves.
Saving them from themselves. So that would require a simple majority in Parliament to bring the legislation to Parliament. And can the opposition bring that kind of legislation to Parliament?
Oppositions in our system don't tend to have anything that is on the agenda that is possible. I think once a month there is a day allowed to the opposition, but by and large, they don't control the agenda. That's purely a government issue. And that's.
What about the issue of a fixed date for elections? Can that be brought to Parliament, and will that only require a simple majority?
Certainly, I believe so. Looking at the Constitution, that is not one of the sections which requires a special majority. It only requires a simple majority. We could do it if we have the political will to do it. It has been tried. Legislation was pulled back in the PP government administration for different reasons. But those are things that are quite possible with a simple majority, and radically change our constitution or governance system to our advantage, I think. And they can and should be done.
Yeah. What do you see are the benefits to the citizenry of having a fixed date for elections?
When you know that I think that having a fixed date doesn't allow, and there are exceptions to that. If you look at the British model when they introduced it, they carved out exceptions because there may be times when you need to have less than a full term. But when you do it, it means you can prepare yourself. There is no advantage to the government in power. It levels the playing field as it is. And people know that on a certain day, you can expect elections to occur. And there are many things relating to elections that are peripheral to that you can put in place in order to take advantage of a fixed date for elections.
Tim, so far we've talked about a variety of bits of legislation that could be passed or could be brought to Parliament. If you were to wave a magic wand and come up with one piece of legislation, what do you think would be the most important piece of legislation that could change the way we do business?
Yeah. In my view, at the present, and in fact, since 1981, we have a flawed democracy. You cannot have a democracy, say that you have a democracy, when in fact 23%, up to 23% and maybe more, do not have representation in Parliament. That we find a politically fine, but in terms of governance, you have excluded and therefore disfranchised a whole section of your voting electorate. And what that means and can mean is that therefore you bring to the table, the governance table, all of the potential that might otherwise be derived. And I think that is the most significant element of what can be done with a special majority. My own view is that a mixed form of proportional representation, mixed being first past the post for your constituencies as we have now, and then for an equal amount under proportional according to the percentage of the vote you get, subject to your acquiring a certain minimum threshold. You don't want to have a dozen parties because somebody got 0.5%. So you need to have a threshold. And I think that would produce more of the kind of in between political parties in order to find a commonality that will work for everybody. And I think we dramatically change the governance if in fact, and this was recommended by Wood in pre-1976. It's not today that is true.
So that is a recommendation that has already been put on the table. But I just want to bring you back a little to explain what you meant by 23% of the population supported the party in power. Could you explain that a little more?
Sure. No, I say supported a party that didn't get any representation. So you look back in 1981, ONR won 23% of the vote. In fact, I think back then the ULF, which was the party in 1981, won 16% of the vote and got, let's say, 10 seats. I'm not sure of the exact number. So a party that had far less votes got seats in our parliament. And therefore, in terms of people, we're a small country, 1.3 million people, an electorate of under a million, I would think. And there you find that 23% of those people did not have any representation. When that same, if you like, event happened in New Zealand, where 12% were unrepresented, immediately thereafter, the government in power set up a commission in order to recommend a change. And that's when they moved to a mixed form of proportional New Zealand. And New Zealand is a country that has, at the time, it had 3 million people. So it's more within our ballpark as opposed to looking at a country with 60 million or 200 million that doesn't, it doesn't correlate to Trinidad and Tobago. And you would find in the 90s, when this happened in New Zealand, a whole slew of legislation came into the picture, such as fiscal responsibility, to change the trajectory of New Zealand. New Zealand, not unlike Trinidad today, had hit a wall. Their natural gas had gone down to zero. They were floundering. And until they brought in that legislation, they were, as we are today, searching and wondering what is going to happen tomorrow. And they, enabling that legislation, made a dramatic change. And New Zealand, in fact, turned to farming. Farming became the mainstay of the economy. And today, they are a first world country. And in the indices, the top of the indices anywhere in the world, we can do the same. Yes.
So are you suggesting that with a simple change of legislation and change of representation within the parliament, we can have a cultural shift in this country?
I think that I like the idea of the Citizens' Assembly I mentioned to you earlier, because it allows people to participate. Right now, we feel all we can do is stain our finger once every 5 years. But here is the opportunity with a Citizens' Assembly to participate in matters that impact directly with you. And that allows then, providing the government introduces legislation, for a referendum to, in fact, for the whole population to determine, do we want this or don't we? And because in Trinidad and Tobago, I think generally speaking, people from every class and from every race have a feeling that they don't belong, that they are disadvantaged. Every single sector feels disadvantaged. And here's any opportunity to say, this is my opportunity, what I wanted, and explore potential to be great.
Thank you very much. And on that note, that we have the potential to be great. Thank you very much, Timmy Hamel Smith, for being part of Demming Chronicles. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Demming Chronicles, and welcome, Gillian. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me here, Denise.
This is our segment that I call Joy, because it's a segment in which we want to focus on some things that bring any of us some joy in life. You are involved with ARC. Can you tell us something about ARC?
Okay, so ARC stands for the Alliance of Rural Communities. And we are an evolving collective that started from an impulse to I'm a chocolate maker, so an impulse to teach farmers who grow cocoa how to make chocolate, and has gradually evolved into much more than that. And we have several communities in Trinidad and Tobago that are involved, a couple in St. Lucia, one in Guyana, and some evolving entries elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. And have you seen any transformations of those communities since you have been involved with them?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, we are undergoing what I call a decolonization process. I think we became politically decolonized to an extent, but we didn't do the rest of the work. So we ended up still using ideas, philosophies, thinking, products from elsewhere, and that actually takes a toll on people. So giving support to actually see what's around us, what's in us, and what we can do with these things, a combination of the two, really is something that I think is just how we are as humans. And when we're not doing that, it actually has a big effect on us.
So tell me, what evidence have you seen of the changes because people are now doing what naturally they wish to do?
Okay, well, first of all, there's money, right? Because if you're in an oppressed community where the markets pretty much organized for the activity to be out there, then having money in your pocket makes a difference. So I think we need to actually have that central to any effort to empower people, that they have to have the right to a decent life, to be able to buy money for their phone card and so on. Last year, the revenue for ARC, which is a very young organization, it's very startup oriented, was over $1 million TT. So that means that money that would probably have gone into export product, passed through the hands of distributors, but not really through anybody else, is now actually passing through communities. So I would say that we have to start the conversation there. Beyond that, I think there's a big difference. I mean, we talk very openly about race, class, gender, age, and about the way that right now we have organized our societies with hierarchies and differences. And basically, when people get to see that it's not only it's not their failure. It's not just because they're stupid or they can't figure it out. There actually is a system in place that makes it difficult to perform at our best. So that conversation, and having that conversation now for some people it's 2 years, for some people it's 3 years, for some people it's 4 years now, makes a difference in what you think about who you are.
Gillian, in some of your preamble, you talked about the structures of society. Can you just explain what you mean by the structures that kind of underpin the way we operate and how we need to change those structures?
Okay, so one of the things is that for tens of thousands of years, humans lived land-based cultures. And that means that a lot of the rules by which we operated came from our interaction with the environment and the natural laws of the land. That there is a rainy season and a dry season. That there is night and there's day. There are places that are deserts and places that are rainforests. And so we structured our culture based on land decisions. How could we best live in this land? And structuring within a land-based culture, what you find when you do the research is that those societies tend to be very gender egalitarian, non-homophobic, supportive of young people to have autonomy and voice. There are a lot of positive changes because the implications of not doing that are pretty severe. I mean, a tree doesn't drop its fruit in the hand of a man more than it does a woman, or vice versa. When the wind blows, the mango will fall. So the rules of land-based cultures tend to be very egalitarian, support diversity to some extent, but also support tight communities. As time went on, we began to live according to human rules, the rules of the human society. And those rules can and cannot be in sync with land-based rules. So we are operating in systems. And the system that a lot of us are responding to at present is not the land system. And we see that. We see that in the results of the products that we make, the consequences of the fossil fuel industry. So it's not rocket science. It's not something that I have to make up. I can very simply explain the difference between a land-based and a culture-based society with human hierarchies making the decision. So it's kind of, for me, a lot of it is the difference between, are you motivated from the inside and from your interactions with the system in which you live, the full system, including other species, or are you motivated by rewards or punishments from other humans? And you can kind of see that really quickly in how a society functions and the dysfunction that that type of reward punishment based system leads to. It does not lead to healthy society. So a lot of the challenges that we are having in Trinidad and Tobago right now, people will say, okay, it's a colonial problem. Yes, it is a colonial problem, but the colonial problem was based on ignoring land-based rules and putting into place rules that were not about egalitarian concepts, not about good use of the land, not about good interactions with other species. So we are seeing the consequences of it. I mean, every day when you open the crime page, you see the consequences of living based on a reward punishment system. And that's being reinforced every day in our school system with the youngest, most vibrant minds, who really are the ones who can move a society out of the challenges when that group collaborates with other age groups.
And Gillian, as we bring this interview to a close, tell me, what brings you joy in terms of ARC?
Right. Well, it's not just in terms of ARC. I have kind of a low bar. A lot of things make me happy. So it's, I mean, I look around and I just see so much richness every day, in every situation, in every interaction. When there's something that might have roughness or violence in it, I see opportunity. I see the opportunity to shift that. I see a symptom that allows us to see that there is a problem rather than it being squelched and pushed down. So I'm actually, when it comes to joy and happiness, I mean, I have the normal Trini cynicism, which I actually enjoy topping off my joy with, but I see joyful opportunity around me all the time.
And on that note, where Gillian sees joyful opportunity around us all the time, and she tops up the Trini cynicism with joy, we bring this interview to an end. Thank you very much, Gillian, for being part of Demming Chronicles. We'll be back.
Nice chatting. Okay.